Here are the top 20 takeaways and developments from week 2 that you need to know for fantasy football purposes. There's a lot to talk about. First off, I want to talk about J.K. Dobbins. He continues to perform. Dobbins is averaging 9.9 yards per carry over the last 2 games, and he's the RB4 through the first 2 weeks of the season. Gus Edwards is splitting early down work evenly with him, but besides actually performing, Dobbins also has the edge over Edwards on the goal line and on passing downs. A little bit of a tougher test in Pittsburgh next week, but Dobbins is really tough to sit right now. The Packers got it done without Jordan Love. They relied on Josh Jacobs here. You got to give credit to Matt LaFleur for being able to sustain this type of offensive production despite going from Jordan Love to Malik Willis. Josh Jacobs handled 32 carries for 151 yards, but there was hardly any dependable receiving production on the Packers. They only ran 17 pass plays in this game. So, it's going to be tough to start any of the Packers pass catchers next week in Tennessee. If I'm going to start anyone, it would be Jaden Reed, and hopefully he's a little bit healthier going into next week. Garrett Wilson has had a little bit of a slow start. He hasn't been terrible. He's had 2 double-digit fantasy weeks, but the ceiling just hasn't been there for him. But the good news is that he's seen 29% target share, 45% air yard share. He's running around on every Aaron Rodgers drop back. So the big games are going to come, right? I think that can start next week against the Patriots defense that just allowed 246 receiving yards to both DK Metcalf and JSN. So don't panic on Garrett Wilson, and if you're looking for a high-end wide receiver, he might be somebody you want to throw some offers at. I would monitor Tyjae Spears' ankle injury. Ian Rappaport did say that it's not a big injury, so that's good. But the split between Pollard and Spears was a lot closer in week 2 than it was in week 1 until Spears left the game with an ankle injury. If he is out or limited next week, I think Pollard's going to be tough to sit against the Packers next week given his usage. He's averaging 98 yards from scrimmage on 21.5 touches. Pretty good. And he's looking a lot better than he did last year. Malik Nabers, 18 targets in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up leading the league in targets. This team is going to have a ton more negative game scripts, maybe 15 more of them, right on the horizon, and we could see Nabers be the focal point for Daniel Jones and whoever he gets benched for eventually. But damn near 40% target share through 2 games, which is absolutely absurd for a rookie wide receiver. It looks like Brock Bowers is a set it and forget it tight end. Like, I can't name a tight end that I would rather start over Brock Bowers next week, maybe outside of Trey McBride, right? I wouldn't be surprised if things stay this way for Brock Bowers. He's my tight end 2 probably next week, maybe tight end 1, I don't know. But 25% target share after catching all 9 of his targets for 98 yards in his second career game. Very, very impressive, okay? He did this on only 65% route participation, and we have to assume that's going to go up from here, right? Imagine that kind of production on only 65% route participation. That's not a full-time role. So I would assume that goes up a little bit, and, at least we know that, he could be efficient and he'll be hyper-targeted on the routes that he does run. On the other side of the spectrum, Isaiah Likely had a similar situation last week, but he has another tight end running ahead of him, so he fell back to earth. Mark Andrews led the Ravens tight end duo with 4 catches for 51 yards on 5 targets, 76% route participation. Likely's route participation fell to 49%, which led to a disappointing 2-catch, 26-yard day. He's going to have a high route participation more consistently if he's going to be an every week starting fantasy tight end. He'll probably still be a low-end tight end 1 for me this week, but, for some reason they felt like they needed to play Nelson Aguilar more in this game. Clint Kubiak has transformed the Saints offense. They've scored 11 touchdowns on offense through 2 games, okay? Alvin Kamara had a monster fantasy performance with 44 fantasy points, 22 fantasy points last week. Derek Carr is looking very comfortable. Chris Olave finished with 4 catches for 81 yards, but he only ran 16 routes. He had a 38% target share in this game. So if you're bullish on this offense, I would be bullish on Chris Olave moving forward. And Rashid Shaheed, his big playability combined with 25% target share, 22% target share the last 2 weeks, that makes him a high-end wide receiver 3 pretty easily with upside, but this is just a masterclass by Clint Kubiak, so I'm going to stay bullish on this offense moving forward. Chris Godwin is absolutely dominating out of the slot. He is the overall wide receiver 1 so far through 2 games. 33% target share, 23.5 fantasy points per game. Offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, he moved Godwin back into the slot where he belongs, and he also brought the Cooper Kupp role with him from his time with Sean McVay. Godwin was and continues to be a must-start. You got to monitor Amon-Ra St. Brown's injury as well. He got banged up throughout this game, multiple injuries. It's concern for a quad injury and a knee injury, MCL potentially. But Dan Campbell did say it doesn't look to be long-term, which is good. I don't know what that means. That's a little subjective. We'll find out today, hopefully. But St. Brown received 19 targets against the Bucs on Sunday. That's what you want to see. He did bounce back. He's the clear number 1 there. Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, they would get a bump in target share if Amon-Ra misses time. And no, I'm not worried about Sam Laporta just yet. Keep starting him. The Browns backfield, we thought it was certain, but it's becoming uncertain now because after being an afterthought in week week 1, D'Onta Foreman created a timeshare with Jerome Ford and actually doubled Ford's carries. He had 14 carries in this game, despite Ford being way more efficient in this game with 7. But Foreman ended up being on the field for both of their goal line snaps, so the backfield really can't be trusted next week. Jackson Smith and the Jigba, breakout game. Let's go. DK Metcalf and him combined for 30 targets in this game. It would really be a thing of beauty if we had this passing offense just funneled through these 2 wide receivers. But it was great to see JSN finally showed up, to show us what he's capable of. And he gets upgraded to a high-end wide receiver 3. Like, maybe that's too low, but 16 targets, 12 for 117. I hope you bought low. Cardinals offense is really taking form here. Kyler Murray, he looked unstoppable against the Rams. And it all started with getting Marvin Harrison Jr. more involved from the get. They were targeting him. He looked like a completely different player after starting slow in week 1. He caught 4 of his 8 targets this week, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. He led the Cardinals with 38% target share, followed by Trey McBride's second straight week of 29% target share. Javonte Williams is taking a little bit more control of the Broncos' backfield. It's not super pretty because the Broncos' offense is not looking good, but Williams is moving towards a full control of Denver's backfield. His snap share went from 52% to 66% this week. He had 16 opportunities to McLaughlin's 3, 5 catches for 48 yards. Is really what saved his day on top of his inefficient day on the ground. But the hope is that those targets continue to give him an every week floor. Not much ceiling here at the moment, but the floor could be there. It looks like Isiah Pacheco is going on IR. They're still getting some tests to determine the severity of the injury, but he does seem to have a fractured fibula. He's going to be on IR. He'll miss a minimum of 4 games, but this injury has a much longer timeline. We're talking months, okay? Samaje Perine, Carson Steele, these are the 2 running backs to prioritize on waivers. If I'm picking today, I think Perine would be my choice for best long-term ad. He's their receiving back. You have Patrick Mahomes. You want the guy catching passes from Patrick Mahomes. They wanted to establish the run because they had somebody who could do that for them. They had somebody who they depended on, and that was Isiah Pacheco. Now, are they going to depend on Carson Steele now? Is that going to be an identity for them? Running the ball with Carson Steele? I don't think so. I do think when they get to the goal line, they want to run it in. They do it with Carson Steele. But overall, the guy who I think will be on the field more, I think it's going to be Samaje Perine. So I'm looking to add him. I think this is going to be a little bit of a timeshare. It might be a little annoying at times, but if I'm looking for a running back, I think Perine's the ad. If you miss out on him, I think, getting Carson Steele is a solid consolation prize. It looks like Zach Moss still has full control of the Bengals backfield, right? We got a 2-week sample size now. Moss hit 80% of snaps in yesterday's game, along with all the important ones, right? All the important roles. It is worth noting that Moss can have some big weeks coming up once the Bengals offense gets it together, like maybe next week at home against the Commanders. I don't know. I think we could see it. I'm not super worried about Anthony Richardson. He's getting some growing pains, okay? He had some real issues on Sunday, but I don't think this should be an indictment on his fantasy value, okay? We have to take the good with the bad with him, and there will be a lot of good, right? Specifically for fantasy purposes. He had a bad game. He's still the QB7 through 2 weeks on a points per game basis, so don't hesitate starting him next week at home against the Bears. Zach Charbonnet, he barely left the field for Seattle. In case Kenneth Walker is out again, it's good to know that Charbonnet is handling all the backfield work for Seattle. 96% of snaps, 19 touches. That'll get the job done as an RB2 with RB1 upside if he ends up scoring. You also got to monitor Cooper Kupp's injury. He has an ankle injury. He left the game in a boot. That doesn't always suggest a serious injury. It's kind of just used for protection, but we're still waiting on news on this. Hopefully he doesn't have to miss much time, if any, right? Hopefully it's just a low ankle sprain, but we'll see. If he does end up missing time, Demarcus Robinson becomes more interesting, but still flex play at best. And then you have preseason star Jordan Whittington. Will be an intriguing pickup as well as Cooper Kupp's kind of direct backup out of the slot. And then you have to monitor Evan Ingram's injury, right? He hurt his hamstring in pregame warmups, literally the worst time to get hurt, okay? But there's also a good chance he misses this week as well. So make sure you have a backup tight end ready to go. Brenton Strange was somewhat of a 1-for-1 replacement for the Jaguars in terms of role, and he ended up with 6 targets, 3 catches for 65 yards. That's going to do it for the takeaways for this week, guys. We'll be back tomorrow on our podcast for the waiver wire episode and all the pickups. And who's going to be number 1? Maybe Samaje Perine? I don't know. We'll see. See you guys tomorrow.